inside of the carriage. And no standing up. No, don't do that. Somebody might grab it. I wouldn't put it past people and some of the people here in Savannah not to grab your leg. And no standing up at any point. That seems like common sense, but there's a reason we tell you to stand up. You guys have a great time. We'll see you when you get back.
All right. Perfect. Walk on.
Starting off. There you go.
I'm smiling.
These two? Yeah. They've been pulling a carriage their whole, or pulling something their whole lives, but working in Savannah, not too long. About 3 years and 6 months.
Okay.
All right. How is everybody this morning? Afternoon, morning.
Yeah, it's still
This time. Yeah. Good, glad to hear it. Y'all, my name is Katie. I'll be your tour guide through Savannah today. And the two big boys here in front of us, from left to right, I've got Jack and Timber. Jack, Timber. Now these boys are a pair of Belgian draft horses. And they weigh in just at 2,000 pounds each.
Wow.
They're big boys. Now, draft horses in general are capable of pulling 3 times their body weight without wheels.
Oh my
Wow.
Guys, we're nowhere near 3 times their body weight.
No,
We
no.
have wheels. I promise you, this is a very, very easy day for them.
good.
In fact, this is their early retirement gig.
Oh, okay.
We got each of these horses from Pennsylvania.
Okay.
They've both been Amish plow horses their whole lives.
Oh, well, this is easy then.
Oh yeah, these two have done their time doing hard manual labor.
Yeah.
They decided to move on down to Savannah for an easier pace of life.
Savannah, okay.
And they do get barked at frequently.
Okay.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
The boys. Now, real quick, one quick thing about these two. So Jack here, the one on my left. Well, I'll start with Timber here, the one on my right. Timber, the red one, he thinks Jack is his very best friend in the entire world. Timber loves Jack. Jack thinks Timber is his arch nemesis. Jack hates Timber. So if you guys hear me yell at Jack throughout the tour, or make a weird corrective noise,
Easy.
that is me just yelling at Jack for trying to bite Timber.
Oh, okay.
He does it all the time. I try to catch him before he gets to him, but sometimes he gets him. It's a universal fact. Make everything better. Now the second prohibition, that was no Catholics.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That's right. They heard there was no booze. They didn't want to come anyway.
Okay.
Although they really didn't care if you were Catholic or not, in fact. He was actually very, very open-minded religiously. However, Spain was a Catholic nation at that time. In fact, the Pope was Spanish then. So Oglethorpe, he wanted to ensure that if the Spanish ever did invade, well, that his colonists would not be sympathetic towards them, simply because of a shared religion. He also wanted to ensure that his colonists would always remain loyal to the king without having any other ties to the Pope, just in case those two ever disagreed. Third prohibition. This is a big one, however, it rarely gets talked about. Third prohibition. That was no slavery. When Savannah was founded, Georgia was in fact the only free colony out of the 13. Now, clearly that prohibition didn't last very long. However, I do like to point out the fact that we were the only free colony, as well as the very first free colony.
Wow.
We tried. Now the fourth prohibition. This is where people start to think that I actually do make up things about Savannah. I really don't. And even if I did, it wouldn't be this. It's not creative. Fourth prohibition. No lawyers.
Okay.
Oglethorpe personally just hated lawyers. He thought if you were truly innocent, you'd be able to defend yourself in a court of law. He thought lawyers were basically just scam artists. So we outlawed them. It's fun to be in charge.
Right.
Make up all kinds of rules. Now, just despite the fact that Oglethorpe was a very forward-thinking, interesting, and smart man, which he really was. He was a neat guy and a fantastic humanitarian. And it turns out he was absolutely horrible at running a colony. Oh, I mean awful at it. Only 10 years after he founded Georgia, the king wrote to him demanding that he leave Savannah and return home to England.
Oh, wow.
You know, it was so bad that the man got grounded. That's rough. Once Oglethorpe left the colonies, he actually never did return. He lived out the rest of his life back in Europe. Now, only about 10 years after he left the colonies, all 4 of those prohibitions he had put into place, those were all overturned. Meaning our longest prohibition really only lasted just under 20 years. Surprisingly, the longest lasting prohibition here in Savannah was the no slavery prohibition.
Wow.
That was not overturned until 1751. Not so surprisingly, the very first prohibition to get overturned, the no alcohol prohibition.
Right.
Yeah, we got rid of that one so fast and never looked back. One last thing about Oglethorpe, which is kind of interesting. Oglethorpe was the only founder of a colony to be alive to hold it at the end of the Revolutionary War. So very, very, very basically, Jackson, Oglethorpe was able to watch his colony of Georgia turn in to the state of Georgia. Okay. And that's pretty neat.
Wow.
Go boys. This beautiful large white structure here on my right. This building is called the Eastman House. We get a good view of it past these trees. This structure was built in 1844 and was originally just a single family home. Nothing so big or extravagant. Just a cozy, quaint little 12,000 square foot house.
Oh, only. Okay.
Just a real manageable size.
For minutes. Yeah. Wow.
Now, frankly, that home is not all that historically significant. However, it does happen to be one of my very favorite homes in Savannah. So I just like to point it out and make everybody look at it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's a blatant abuse of the small amount of power that I have. Probably why I only have a small amount of power. But it's an absolutely stunning home, and it is today an office building. So it doesn't get a whole lot of attention.
Okay.
Now, the square that we're in here is called Chippewa Square. Chippewa was named after the Battle of Chippewa, which happened up in Canada during the War of 1812. The square is also lovingly referred to as the Forrest Gump Square.
Oh,
You guys
right.
remember the movie Forrest Gump?
Yes.
There's a
Yeah.
scene in that film where Tom Hanks is sitting on a bench, eating a box of chocolates, waiting for that bus to come pick him up.
Right.
That scene was filmed on the other side of the square, just north of us. Now, sorry guys, there is not a bench there today. In fact, there's never really a bench there. There's always just a movie prop. Now, we did try to leave that movie prop in the square for people to enjoy. However, we very quickly realized that, well, because we're an open container city, we're not really able to have nice things out in the open.
Okay.
Y'all, people tried to steal the bench. Okay, a bench is not something little that you can just put in your pocket and walk away. You've got to have accomplices. You've got to have a getaway car. This is serious. It finally ended with a high-speed pursuit down 17th of the bench.
Oh,
A
wow.
high-speed pursuit. No, it's a movie prop.
Okay.
I can't even tell you what to say about that. Now, we did finally take our bench and protect it. It is in our visitor center today. Now, you can go look at that bench. However, you cannot sit on that bench, nor can you take a picture of that bench. But if you really want to, you can buy a picture of that bench.
Okay.
Here's a pro tip for you. Go back in the Chippewa Square back there. Take a picture of any bench in that square. Go home, tell all your friends it's the Forrest Gump bench. They're all going to believe you.
Yep.
They won't fact check you at all. Walk, Jackson. Alive, just bicyclist. Do not do it, Jack. Walk on. You, sir, behave yourself. So rude. Jack tries to get away with the I'm not touching you game. I was
Okay.
like, I didn't actually bite him.
Yeah, I saw that and hit that part.
He's ridiculous. Well done. Thank you. This building coming up here on my right, this one looks incredibly out of place in Savannah. Sort of Moroccan or even Middle Eastern in style here. That was originally a barn or a stables.
Oh, wow.
For a militia cavalry unit here called the Georgia Hussars. Now Hussars, they only ever rode Arabian horses. They wanted their barn to reflect that, which really just means those boys want to show off. They did a good job of that. Now, a few years after the Hussars left that building, a man by the name of Henry Ford bought it. Henry Ford turned that barn into a display room for his Model T cars. Part of a very large marketing ploy that he had. Ford went around the country buying up old, beautiful barns and stables like that, turning them into display rooms in an effort to show the American public that his cars, well, they would soon take the place of the horse and buggy. Ford was an absolute genius at marketing. Not a genius at being a good guy, but genius at marketing. We've all got to have our strong suits.
Right, right.
The home straight ahead of us is sort of peachy colored home with that long green awning. This is called the Green-Meldrim House. Now this home was built in 1853. And at that time, this was the most expensive home ever built in Savannah. It cost $93,000.
Oh, wow.
However, most famous for being where General Sherman stayed when he occupied Savannah. That is where Sherman wrote a letter to President Lincoln, gifting Lincoln Savannah as a Christmas present.
Oh, my gosh.
Not a bad gift.
Not a bad gift.
Now, Sherman, he never did burn Savannah like he did, just about every other city he ever came across on his march to the sea. Now, primarily, he didn't burn us because, well, 3 days before Sherman ever even got here, Savannah city officials rode out to meet him. And then we very, very promptly surrendered. Showed him.
Wow.
We surrendered, gave him that expensive house, and then gave him 25,000 bales of cotton that were not ours. And then we begged, and we pleaded, and we said, "Oh dear God, please don't burn us." Now luckily, bribery and groveling, it works. He spared the city. Thank God he did. That story is honestly one of the main reasons you will not see any Civil War or Confederate monuments within the downtown area of Savannah. The monuments you see within our squares, those are going to be for Revolutionary War heroes or for someone who helped found the city. There are no Civil War monuments here.
Except in Forsyth Park.
Forsyth Park, fallen soldiers of the Confederacy.
Right.
Boy. But within the actual, just...
Yeah, I know what you're right. Yeah.
Now, one word you'll see in Savannah even more than the word Oglethorpe is the word SCAD. The letters SCAD are here the term SCAD. Those letters stand for the Savannah College of Art and Design. Now, SCAD is actually one of the most well-recognized art and design schools in the world today. At this point in time, they own over 80 buildings in Savannah.
Wow.
SCAD started here with one building and less than 100 students. He said today they own over 80 buildings, around 11,000 students here every year, 4 campuses around the world.
Wow.
They're a big deal. I'm not really sure what this
Our friend from Brooklyn, he's an art professor there at SCAD.
Oh, really?
Yep.
No, SCAD did a fantastic job with the city, and they're a large reason that the city of Savannah looks so good today.
Wow.
SCAD was never allowed to tear down any of our historic buildings to create their own campus.
Wonderful.
So what they did is they went around, they bought up old dilapidated homes and buildings that no one else wanted, restored the outside of those buildings to their original historic beauty, and then they renovated the inside to absolutely whatever they needed it for. They have done a beautiful job of the city.
Very smart.
Very smart, and they have been so good for the city.
But ain't they buying up about everything that comes up for sale?
They've bought quite a bit. They have been capped now. They're no longer allowed to buy any buildings within the historic district. They were capped at 60 buildings within the historic district, or 660 or 65.
I knew it sounded like they needed a little hold on them somewhere or other. They just be just a college space.
It did start ending up that way. So they, like I said, they did get capped. And that's why also SCAD has been buying up buildings outside the historic district now. We are basically a college town, we have been. And it's kept the city beautiful and young and fun. So I can't get too mad. Now, this building here on my left with the green shutters, as well as that carriage house out back, this is a beautiful house museum today called the Andrew Lowe House. Andrew Lowe is a very prominent member of society here in Savannah. Very wealthy individual. However, all he's ever remembered for today is for being the father-in-law of a woman named Juliette Gordon Lowe. Juliette Gordon Lowe, she was the founder of the Girl Scouts of America. This is where she lived when she founded those Girl Scouts in 1912. Now, if you go inside that home, you take a tour, you will not hear much about Juliette Gordon Lowe or the Girl Scouts. They say a little bit about her, but not much, sort of passing. They will talk mostly about the Lowe family there. However, Juliette Gordon Lowe was interesting. Juliette Gordon Lowe was born and raised in Savannah. Sorry, caught me off guard. She was born and raised here in Savannah, and the home where she was raised, that house is also a museum, and it's owned by the Girl Scouts. Now, if you tour that home, they will tell you all about Juliette Gordon Lowe. So if you go take a tour of that home, they're not going to talk much about Juliette Gordon Lowe. They talk mostly about the Lowe family in that home.
Sorry.
But Juliette Gordon Lowe, she was born and raised in Savannah. The house where she was raised is a museum today, and that one's owned by the Girl Scouts. So if you tour that home, you'll hear all about her and the Girl Scouts. I don't know if any of y'all know an author named Flannery O'Connor.
Oh, yeah.
Some people do, some people don't. She was raised in this house here on my right.
Oh, wow.
That little painting out front. That's a skinny little narrow house right there. That is where she was raised. And it is a museum today. You can go tour that little home. It's the only house museum in Savannah that is not decorated to the era where it was at its most wealthy. Most of these homes you'll see at the height of wealth. That home is decorated in Depression era, when she lived there. Oh, it's a fascinating home.
Yeah.
So many people don't know who she was, though. They're like, no, who's he? Ow. She. Oh, people really do. They say, who is he? Author? No one teaches her anymore. Now, guys, the building's straight ahead of us. And you'll see as we come up closer how far back it goes to my right. This building is the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist. Very beautiful, very iconic, very large cathedral here in Savannah.
Yeah.
The building itself takes up almost the entire block. And it can seat about 1,000 individuals. Not bad for a city that once outlawed Catholics.
Right. Very good.
We'll come past the front of this church in just a moment. You'll get a really good view of just how beautiful it is. If we ever get there. Now, when we come past the front of this church, you'll get this, like I said, you'll see how beautiful and intricate it is. Now, guys, I promise you, it is about 10 times more so on the inside. This church is stunning. Now, they do allow, honestly, even encourage walking self-guided tours during the day. Just as long as that little red plaque's not out front. It says no touring, worship in progress. Pretty self-explanatory. Now, I highly recommend, even if you're not a church, cathedral type person, to take just a few moments out of your day to spin around that church. The architecture alone is breathtaking. The church was also recently named a basilica, which means if the Pope were ever to come to this part of the world, that's where he'd give Mass. I'm not even Catholic, I think that's cool.
And that was only a couple of years ago he did that.
Yeah, it was not long. It's 2019, I think.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
It was very recently.
Yep.
And I desperately want the Pope to come to Savannah.
Yeah.
Because I want to see the Pope Mobile go around all of our squares, like that little bubble.
Oh,
just
yeah,
around.
right.
I think it'd be adorable.
Right.
Probably not the feeling I should have is adorable, but that's what I got. Now, guys, I will tell you, the cathedral there is one of only 3 religious structures that I ever recommend touring. Otherwise, I stay well out of that realm altogether.
Right.
Safer that way. The cathedral, though, is too beautiful for me not to recommend. There are 2 other religious structures that I do recommend touring. Real quick, though, it's very important to note, we are not running this red light. We're walking it. Big difference. Oops, oh, scared me. Now, there are 2 other religious structures I do recommend touring if you have the time and the inclination. If you don't, no big deal. One of those structures is our synagogue. It's called the Temple Mikveh Israel. It is the 3rd oldest Jewish congregation in the country. The congregation itself dates back to 1733. I don't even know why I tried talking in this intersection. I also have a radio link for you. Well done. All right, synagogue. Temple Mikveh Israel. It's the 3rd oldest Jewish congregation in the country. They have the oldest Torah in the United States in that synagogue, as well as a signed letter from President George Washington in that synagogue.
Wow.
That is stinking cool.
Yeah.
The 3rd religious structure I do recommend, it's called the First African Baptist Church. Like the name suggests, it is the very first African American Baptist church in the country. What makes it so truly special, though, it was an integral part of the Underground Railroad here in Savannah before the Civil War.
Okay.
That tour is important.
Wow, wow, wow.
Now, on a different note, y'all look here to my right, you'll see a long, narrow stretch of grass, the playground at the end. That was originally the dueling grounds for Savannah. That is where gentlemen would go, settle their differences, be real macho, shoot each other. And at least it was conveniently located.
Wow.
Right next to the Colonial Park Cemetery. You know, it's all about convenience here in the South. It is far too hot for us to be lugging around dead bodies everywhere. Figured out a way to roll them downhill.
Wow.
Colonial Park Cemetery here. This is Savannah's oldest surviving cemetery. It dates back to about 1750.
Wow.
Okay, I know hearing a tour guide say about 1750 is a little bit odd. Unfortunately, though, the exact date the cemetery was established, we don't know. 1750, that's our best guess. One of the main reasons we don't know the real date to the cemetery, in the 1700s, stone grave markers would have actually been very expensive and hard to work with. The very first markers in the cemetery would have been made out of wood. Wooden grave markers don't last very long in this climate. They rotted away years ago. But as far as we can tell, the cemetery was established in 1750, and it was an active cemetery until 1853, just over 100 years. Today, it's a park. It's a very beautiful, slightly creepy park, but it's a park. And it's kept up by the DAR,
Wow.
the Daughters of the American Revolution. Now, not really anyone ever thinks of Savannah when they think of the Revolutionary War.
Right.
You can't really put those 2 things together.
No.
However, turns out Savannah played a part in that war. In fact, we have the second bloodiest battle of that war fought right here.
Wow.
It's called the Siege of Savannah. Now,
Okay.
in that battle, about 1,000 U.S. soldiers lost their lives here. Only 55 British soldiers died.
Wow.
That is why we don't ever talk about it. Y'all, we swept that battle right on the rug and just said, Savannah, who? I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
But because of the time frame, many of the individuals who died in battle are buried inside the cemetery today.
Okay.
In fact, we have one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence buried in that cemetery. That's pretty
Wow.
stinking cool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, do not worry about the fact that he's basically the least known signer. No one's ever heard of him.
Right.
That part doesn't matter. He signed the document. That part's cool. Cool. I'll test you guys a little bit, see if y'all have ever heard of him. Now, it doesn't count if you've lived in Georgia and you know his last name because it's a county here. That doesn't count. His name was Button Gwinnett. Never heard of him, have you?
Nope.
No, it's okay. No one has. Good old Button. Honest to God, his first name was Button, like a shirt button.
Right.
That wasn't a pet name, that wasn't a nickname. His mama named him Button. In fact, he had to sign the Declaration of Independence. Button Gwinnett. Now, Button is a fantastic name for a pet or a toddler. Button is a hard name for a grown man in the 1700s. Welcome. It's one of those names you should just absolutely never shorten. You cannot call one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence Bud. I'm sorry, you can't do it. It's rude.
Okay.
I'm sure if he had a little sister, though, she called him Butt all the time.
I bet she did. Whatever.
Now, Button, he did not die in the Revolutionary War. He did die here in Savannah, though. He died as a result of a duel. He fought in our dueling grounds. For some unknown reason, that man thought it'd be a great idea to challenge a very dear friend of his named General McIntosh to a duel.
Oh my God.
Button did not walk away from that. Somehow he didn't know that his good friend, the General, I don't know how he didn't know that he was a great shot.
Oh wow.
And as some sort of cruel trick today, they are buried side by side.
Oh my God.
The city is out for my voice today. I can tell already.
Yeah.
The city's trying to take me down. Won't happen. I'm doing it too long.
Oh boy.
Now, if y'all look to my left, we'll be right in front of it in a second. This large, sort of mustard-colored home with the green shutters here. It's another house museum called the Owens-Thomas House.
Okay.
It's actually my very favorite house museum in Savannah. It's the one I recommend the most highly.
Wow.
The home itself was built in 1819, and it was designed by a man named William J. William J. designed several homes in Savannah. You know, when he designed this home, he wanted to be a little different from everybody else. So rather than use straight lines and right angles, you know, like you do, he designed this home using curves and symmetry.
Wow.
You can see his work with curvature demonstrated on the outside of this home. A beautiful double-sided curved staircase, that curved front porch, even those beautiful solid wooden doors are curved. When those doors are closed, they follow the curvature of that wall perfectly. It's stunning. Now, if you go inside, you'll notice that his love of curvature and symmetry, well, it extends to the inside of that house. There are very few right angles in that home, and it is almost 100% symmetrical.
Wow.
There are doors that go nowhere, and windows that are not real, all in the name of symmetry. Y'all, that home speaks to my OCD in a way I didn't even know was possible. Y'all, that house is perfect. Everything matches up, it all lines up. Just love it. Now, that home also does have a lot of fascinating history to it. That was one of the very first homes in the country to have indoor plumbing.
Oh my gosh.
In fact, that home had indoor plumbing years before the White House ever did.
Oh wow.
Can you imagine how mad the First Lady was?
Yeah.
That some home in Savannah had indoor plumbing before she did? I'd be upset. That home is also where the Marquis de Lafayette stayed when he came through Savannah.
Okay.
In fact, he gave a speech from that home to the entire city of Savannah.
Wow.
So my favorite part about that house, though, it was only ever lived in by one family. From 1819 to 1951, one family lived in that home. There was two branches of one family, but it was one family. Which means some of the artifacts and relics in that home are original to the house itself. Been there ever since 1800s. It's a gorgeous, fascinating home. I highly recommend it. Y'all did very good. Making these suspicious. Jack?
You know him so well, you can see him getting ready.
His ears get flat, and he starts to look.
Yeah.
He'll side-eye timber. Don't look. Stop it. Mean. Why are you so mean? Stop it. Poor Jack. I love Jack so much. He's a little bit cranky, and he's dumber than a box of rocks, y'all. I have seen Jack get stuck behind an open gate. You heard me. We opened the gate to let him into a second pasture. He watched all of his friends go around that gate into the second pasture. He panicked. He couldn't figure out how to walk around it. He panicked so much that he ran up and down the fence line, came back, got stuck again. I love that poor horse. You got not smart. You the best, no. So dumb. Oh, crazy boy. The building here on my right, this is Bradley's Locksmith. Now Bradley's is Savannah's oldest family-owned business. It was established back in 1883, still in the Bradley family today. They are now on their 5th generation. Mostly though, I point them out because they have my favorite sign here in the alley. It says, we sharpen anything but your wits, and we fix anything but a broken heart.
Oh, very good.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that. I know it's cheesy and hokey. I can't help it. It's my favorite sign. I love it to death. One thing a lot of people have been kind of confused about recently, you look around the city and you're not used to these big live oak trees. It looks an awful lot like fall in Savannah, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Leaves everywhere. Our big live oak trees, they shed their leaves twice a year.
Oh, okay.
Once in the spring and once again in the fall. Each time they shed their leaves, they grow bright green new ones. So these are the blushing green year round. But it does make for an awfully messy spring.
Yeah.
Good boys.
Good boy. Okay. Yeah. It was just a family here. I was hoping there was a connection. I was like, oh, y'all live in Georgia? It might be. You never know. If y'all look left and right over this road, you may notice what it's missing.
Power lines.
There you go. There are no above ground power lines running over that road.
Yeah. We have that in New York. That's,
Very few people get that, but yeah,
Right,
there are
right.
no places around the country that have it. But you look around the city and you will find very few power lines running above ground here.
yeah.
We buried those power lines in the 1970s in order to keep the skyline here looking as original as
Yeah,
possible.
good. All right.
Most of the time, people don't ever notice it. They know that Savannah looks different, clean, and quaint. You can't put your finger on it, it looks different. Most of the time, what you're noticing is that lack of power lines.
Wow.
It's a beautiful thing that we've done. Now, occasionally, you will find some power lines above ground here. When they're above ground power lines, what that means is there's something underground that we didn't want to disturb. Whether that's old infrastructure, historic bricks, there are a lot of reasons. But where we could bury those power lines, we did.
Very good.
Good boys.
Yeah, you gotta stop trying to beat them up. Y'all been working together long enough. You're never gonna accept it.
Why do they have the little horns on their saddle? On their.
The silver knot.
The
The
balls?
silver, yeah.
Those are just decoration.
Oh, okay.
My boss will tell you they're lightning rods. They're not. They're just decoration. Lightning rods. So awful. The square we're in here, this is called Johnson Square. Now, Johnson Square was actually the very first square ever built in Savannah, so it dates back to 1733. It's also the largest square we have. It's about twice the size of any of our other squares. Now, originally, this square was built to be this large in order to house two very big public baking ovens. Now, the base, really the footprint of our ovens, you can still see today, they're the footprint of the fountains on either side of the square. So in just a moment, you'll get a pretty good view of how big those ovens would have been. Okay, there. Now, if y'all can imagine the heat in Savannah in, say, August, Honestly, still September. Now imagine that heat with all of that wonderful humidity back in 1733. Before air conditioning, electric fans. Honestly, before cotton clothing was big. So a whole lot of wool back then. Well, you can imagine that. You can imagine one of the reasons people did not want a wood or coal burning oven in their home.
Right.
You don't need to have a roaring fire in your house if it's already 110 degrees on the inside. So what would happen? The ladies would roll out their dough at home, score the top of it with their initials, drop it off here in the morning, and then they'd come pick up their bread later in the day. Now they would know that bread was theirs because the initials they had scored on the top, those would show up bright and bold when the dough rose. So if you all remember the nursery rhyme, patty cakes,
Right,
there's a
right.
line in it. It says, roll it, mark it with a B. Put it in the oven for baby and me. Well,
Okay.
the mark with a B comes from the tradition of a public baking oven. It's to put your mark or your initial on top of your bread or pie to know that it's yours. Public baking ovens were never very common here in the colony. However, they were common back in Europe. Oglethorpe brought that tradition over with him when he came to Savannah. And that is usually the one fact I can guarantee everyone goes home remembering. It's really the patty cake story and button gwinnett. Those are the two. Now, unfortunately, we are coming up to Jack and Timber's very, very favorite part of the tour.
The end.
The end. If you have any questions for me, horse, history, haunted, or otherwise, I'd be happy to answer for you as best I can. Or if y'all are anything like me and you don't think of a question until about an hour from now, don't feel free to come back by and ask. We're always around.
Does the carriage have brakes, or you just the whole? Nope, it's just the
No
whole.
brakes. Because there are no hills in Savannah, we
Right.
don't really need to use
Right,
brakes.
right,
These guys will stop the carriage on their own. If we had hills, we'd use them.
right, right.
I thought it was not supposed to rain today, but it does feel like rain's coming,
Yeah.
doesn't it? It feels like weather's coming. I don't know if it will or not, but it feels like it. You can never tell in Savannah. You know, if the weather here says there's a 15% chance of rain, it's gonna rain. If it says 90% chance of rain, there's no rain in sight. They just lied to us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I never knew how wrong the weather forecast could be until I lived here.
Okay. Did you get a hurricane recently?
5 years ago,
Oh, okay. Okay.
we got Hurricane Matthew.
Oh, Matthew, right.
Matthew came and hit us directly. Before that, it'd been almost 100 years since we got hit directly.
Oh, okay.
If you look at the coastline, Florida kind of comes in and then it dips in where Georgia's coastline is and juts back out. Because of that perfect little dip, we just send all of our hurricanes on up to Charleston.
Okay.
So go fill in that city.
Do any cruise ships come here?
You would think they would because of our large port, but I think because it's such a big shipping port that we don't have.
Oh, okay. All right, right.
Because it's so busy.
Right, right,
It's the
right.
4th busiest seaport in the country.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's huge. No one thinks of Savannah seaport, but it's a big deal.
Right.
We actually just re-dredged our river so that we can now have super container ships come through,
Okay.
which I didn't know was a thing.
Yeah. Until the Suez Canal.
Right. Then now it's very publicly a thing.
Right.
So guys, I just dropped you all off in a very slightly different spot than where I picked you up. Mostly it's because the city of Savannah says this is where I have to drop off. That's a pretty good reason. If you need to get back to where I picked you up, though, I promise it's really easy. You're gonna walk straight up to that stop sign, Jackson, take a left, and you're gonna walk about 20 feet, turn around the corner. Thank you guys very much. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of your time.
Say your name again.
Katie.
Katie what?
Katie, Sears is my last name.
Great, Katie.
Very interesting.
Very
Good
interesting.
job.
No problem. And if y'all want to say hi to Jack and Timber, you are welcome to. Just say it in front of their faces so they can see you.
Okay.
Jack won't try to bite you, only Timber.
Okay, all right.